Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're diving straight into a truly profound scholarly tradition rooted deeply in 15th century knowledge. We're going to unpack the works of the renowned scholar Jalal al-Din al-Suyuti and explore something known as the science of al-Mubhamaat. Now, this is essentially the study of the unseen, the unspoken, and the deliberately unnamed within the Quran. Trust me, this isn't just dry history, it's a literal masterclass in profound communication.
But right off the bat, this brings us to a super compelling question. Why would a foundational, sacred text deliberately leave out specific identities? I mean, think of it like an ancient detective story. When you read a text that shapes the lives of billions of people, you expect absolute precision, right? Exact dates, specific names, the whole shebang. Yet, time and time again, we get descriptions instead of names. Why hide the names of the very people at the center of these monumental events? What's the hidden wisdom behind this purposeful ambiguity?
Here is our roadmap for today's journey. We'll cover the mystery of missing names, the strict rules against guessing, when names just do not matter, using titles to honor or humiliate, the universal message, and finally, lessons over labels. Let's get right to it.
Kicking things off with part 1, the mystery of missing names, or what we can call the science of omission.
So what exactly are we looking at here? Well, the term al-Mubhamaat refers to people, places, groups, or things mentioned in the text without being explicitly named. Imagine you're reading a modern news article, and instead of printing John Smith, the journalist just writes, "A man entered the building." The identity is completely unspecified. The ancient text does this too. It leaves a blank space where a name should be, referring instead to the one who argued, or the woman who complained. The science of al-Mubhamaat is the rigorous academic pursuit of mapping these historical puzzle pieces. It's about identifying exactly who was standing in that blank space.
Moving right along to our second point, no guessing allowed. And really, the rules of scholarship here are absolutely ironclad.
You see, identifying these figures relies entirely on strictly transmitted reports. There is absolutely zero guesswork or personal opinion allowed here. Actually, think of it like an official police investigation where a suspect's identity is completely unknown. You don't just confidently invent a name without evidence, right? You wait for verified intelligence. Early scholars warned incredibly heavily against claiming certainty where it hasn't been given, pointing out that some identities were deliberately kept hidden by God. Therefore, every single identification within this science relies strictly on authentic accounts from the Prophet, his companions, or the earliest generations of Muslims. No shortcuts. Okay, let's hit section 3, instances where names simply do not matter, because the core message is the main event. Consider this really beautiful, kind of mysterious Quranic example, or like the one who passed by a ruined town. Who was he? What was the town? Just let that sit with you for a second. The text doesn't tell us right away, and that precise omission is doing a ton of heavy lifting. By saying, the one who passed by a ruined town, the ancient text is forcing our entire focus onto the profound lesson of resurrection, of bringing the dead back to life. It's exactly like a modern teacher telling you a story. A businessman lost all his money and rebuilt his life from scratch. If you get hung up on exactly which celebrity businessman they're talking about, you get totally distracted from the core truth. By keeping the subject anonymous, the moral lesson of resilience remains paramount. The lesson matters far, far more than knowing an exact name.
Now, al-Suyuti points out some very practical dimensions to this omission, too. Sometimes, the identity is just incredibly obvious to the original audience. If a British newspaper says, "The king gave a speech today," they don't need to clarify which king. It's a given. Similarly, the Quran mentions Adam and his wife, never explicitly naming Eve, simply because Adam only had one wife. Other times, an ambiguous group, like those upon whom you have bestowed favor, is left unnamed in one chapter, only to be perfectly defined in another chapter, as the prophets, the truthful, and the righteous. It's a brilliant way to avoid unnecessary repetition.
All right, on to part 4. This is where it gets really dramatic, using titles to honor and to humiliate.
Take this deeply profound verse, when he said to his companion. The historical context here is a moment of intense danger. We're talking about two figures hiding in a cave, running from enemies. By referring to this individual not by his given name, but by his steadfast loyalty in a terrifying moment, the text permanently etches his devotion into history. Replacing a name with a title is just a massive literary power move. On one hand, instead of naming Abu Bakr, calling him his companion honors him through that incredibly noble relationship. It's like referring to someone not by their first name, but as the Nobel Prize winner. The title itself is the highest honor you could give. But on the flip side, we see the exact opposite. When referring to a fierce enemy, the text completely refuses to dignify him with his name, instead calling him the one cut off. It's a way of humiliating a tyrant by reducing them to their absolute worst trait, immortalizing their failure rather than their name.
Which brings us to Section 5, the universal message. Let's look at how hiding a name actually protects individuals and expands the scope of the lesson.
On the protection side of things, there was a man whose speech initially pleased people, but his actions, well, they didn't quite match. Early scholars identified him as Al-Itqaan, but here's the beautiful part. Because he later sincerely reformed and became a righteous person, the text never publicly exposes him by name. It offers him profound grace. And on the side of universal law, consider a verse revealed about a specific person who died while migrating. Whoever leaves his home migrating for God and his messenger. By stripping away that single name, the text ensures that any person, in any era, anywhere in the whole world, can step into that role and apply that profound lesson to their own life.
And finally, Section 6, Lessons over Labels. Let's actually unveil some of these hidden identities.
Thanks to centuries of careful study of those transmitted reports we talked about, scholars successfully mapped the historical figures behind these famous titles. The one who argued with Abraham, that was Nimrod. His companion in the cave, Abu Bakr al-Siddiq. The wife of Pharaoh, held up as an absolute paragon of faith, was Asiyah bint Muzayyam. And the blind man who approached the prophet was Abdallah ibn Maktoum. Uncovering these names grounds this timeless text in real, breathing human history. It satisfies our pursuit of knowledge while still maintaining the text's primary focus on the underlying lesson.
So, what is the ultimate takeaway from Al-Suyuti's brilliant work? It's this really profound realization. The text only names people when that specific name explicitly serves the core message. These are not missing facts, guys. They are deliberate omissions with immense wisdom behind them. It actually mirrors the very best of our modern analytical practices. Think about it, like ethical journalism that protects vulnerable identities, or comprehensive case studies that focus on core principles instead of superficial details, or even wise mentors who correct a mistake without publicly exposing the student. It is quite literally the ultimate method for creating universal laws that apply to absolutely everyone.
I want to leave you with a final thought to chew on. We live in a world that is absolutely obsessed with names, callouts, labels, and exposing identities at every possible turn. But what if we applied this 15th century wisdom to our daily lives? How could our modern media, our social networks, and our everyday conversations benefit if we just focused a little less on the label and a little more on the lesson? It's a pretty massive shift in perspective, isn't it? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep asking those big questions and keep looking for the deeper meaning.